He thought the Apache girl was lost forever, until she returned to be his wife, 1800's Western story. Thomas rode his horse through the quiet morning, the wind tugging at his worn coat and the scent of dry grass filling his lungs. Life on the frontier was never easy. Every day brought new challenges, storms, wild animals, and the uncertainty of finding food and shelter. Yet Thomas had a strong spirit and a determination to make a life for himself in this vast, untamed land. He had left behind the familiar towns of the East, seeking freedom and opportunity. What he did not know was that fate had already begun weaving a story that would change his life forever. As he rode along the edge of a small river, the gentle sound of flowing water and the soft chirping of birds filled the air. Thomas's sharp eyes caught a sudden movement near the riverbank. At first he thought it was a deer, but as he approached, he saw a young girl crouched low among the tall reeds. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her bare feet covered in scratches and dust. Her dark hair hung in disarray around her face, and her eyes, wide and fearful, darted toward him. She was alone, and Thomas immediately sensed that she was in danger. He slowed his horse and spoke softly, careful not to frighten her. "It's okay," he said gently. "I won't hurt you." The girl flinched but did not run. She seemed unsure whether he was friend or foe. Thomas dismounted and kept his hands visible as he stepped closer. "I'm Thomas," he said. "You don't have to be afraid. I can help you." For a moment there was only silence. The girl's breathing was shallow, her eyes scanning the surroundings as if expecting someone, or something, to appear from the woods. Thomas noticed the faint scars on her arms and legs, signs that she had been through hardships beyond her years. Finally, she spoke a few words in a language Thomas did not understand. It was melodic but foreign, and Thomas could only guess that she was telling him something important. He shook his head slowly. "I don't understand," he said, "but I can help you. You don't have to stay out here alone." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small piece of bread and a canteen of water, offering them to her. Hunger and thirst must have made her cautious, because after a long moment she accepted the water first and then the bread. Days passed as Thomas and the girl traveled together. He learned to communicate with her through gestures and simple words. She was from the Apache tribe, he soon realized, and her name was Nayeli. She had been separated from her family during a raid and had wandered alone in the wilderness, frightened and unsure where to go. Thomas felt a deep sense of responsibility for her. He built a small fire each night, cooked meals, and kept watch while she slept. In the quiet hours, they shared moments of understanding that needed no words. Thomas was struck by her bravery. Despite the fear in her eyes and the hardships she had endured, Nayeli had a quiet strength and a determination to survive that matched his own. Traveling was not easy. The plains were harsh and unforgiving. Water was scarce, and storms could appear suddenly, drenching them in rain and mud. There were nights when the wind howled so fiercely that it felt as though it would tear the very earth apart. Yet in these moments, Thomas and Nayeli relied on each other for comfort. He would hold the horse steady while she gathered firewood or helped her find shelter under the rocks and trees. Slowly, trust grew between them. Nayeli began to rely on Thomas, not just for protection but for guidance, and Thomas found himself caring for her deeply, far beyond what he had expected. One afternoon, as they crossed a narrow canyon, a rattlesnake appeared, coiled and ready to strike. Nayeli froze, her eyes wide with terror, but Thomas acted quickly. He grabbed a stick and used it to guide the snake away from them. Nayeli watched in awe, and for the first time she smiled. It was a small smile, but it carried relief, gratitude, and something warmer, something Thomas could not yet name. That moment marked a turning point in their journey. She began to trust him not just as a protector, but as a companion. At night, Thomas would tell her stories of the East, of small towns, rivers, and forests he had known as a child. Nayeli, in turn, shared stories of her people, of the Apache way of life, the traditions and the lessons her elders had taught her. Though they spoke different languages, the meaning of their stories was clear. Thomas learned about the courage, wisdom, and resilience that had shaped her, and Nayeli learned that there were people in the world who could offer kindness without expecting anything in return. As the days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger. Thomas began to admire Nayeli's resourcefulness. She could start a fire using dry leaves, track animals in the distance, and find water where he would never have thought to look. She also showed an intuitive understanding of the land, noticing changes in the weather and sensing when danger was near. Thomas realized that despite the fear she had carried for so long, Nayeli had a rare inner strength, a strength that matched his own. He began to feel something he had never felt before, a deep connection that went beyond friendship or gratitude. Yet, amid the beauty of their journey, there was always the knowledge that Nayeli could not stay with him forever. She belonged to her tribe, to a world he could never fully be part of. Sometimes, when the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Thomas would watch her quietly, wondering how fate had brought them together and whether it would tear them apart. Nayeli, too, would gaze at him, her expression thoughtful, caught between gratitude, curiosity, and something like longing. Both understood that their time together was precious, fleeting, and fragile. One evening, as they camped near a small stream, Thomas noticed that Nayeli was unusually quiet. She stared into the water, her reflection rippling across the surface. He sat beside her and offered her some roasted meat, but she shook her head. Finally, she spoke, pointing toward the distant hills where the sun had just disappeared. Though he did not understand the words, her tone carried a clear message. She knew danger was near, and that the safety they had found together was temporary. Thomas felt a pang of worry. He realized that the outside world, with its violence and prejudice, would eventually test the bond they had built. Despite the looming uncertainties, Thomas resolved to protect Nayeli as long as he could. He repaired her shoes, reinforced their shelter, and kept watch each night, alert for signs of trouble. He taught her how to recognize tracks in the dust, how to find edible plants, and how to avoid dangers in the wilderness. Nayeli, in turn, taught him skills he had never learned, such as reading the stars for navigation and understanding the signs of the land. Together, they became a team, two souls bound by survival, trust, and an unspoken understanding. The days were long, filled with challenges and small victories. Thomas and Nayeli learned to hunt together, to gather food, and to protect each other from the harsh realities of frontier life. But it was not just survival that connected them. It was the moments of quiet laughter around the fire, the shared stories under the night sky, and the unspoken comfort of knowing someone was always there. Thomas found that in Nayeli's presence, the vast and lonely plains no longer felt so desolate. There was companionship, warmth, and the beginning of a bond that neither distance nor danger could easily sever. And so, the early days of their journey together passed with a mixture of adventure, wonder, and cautious hope. Thomas did not yet know what the future held, but in those moments, he felt a sense of purpose and belonging that he had never experienced before. Nayeli, too, felt a strange mixture of fear and trust, realizing that she could survive the wilderness not only because of her own strength, but because of Thomas's unwavering presence by her side. In the endless expanse of the West, two lives had intersected, and though neither could see it yet, their story was only just beginning. As the days turned into weeks, Thomas and Nayeli's journey together grew more challenging, yet their bond deepened with each passing moment. The vast plains of the West, which had seemed empty and inviting at first, now revealed their dangers. The sun scorched the earth during the day, and at night the cold seeped into their bones. Food was never guaranteed, and sometimes even the rivers seemed too far to reach. Thomas and Nayeli faced these trials with courage, but the shadow of separation loomed over them like a quiet warning. One morning, as the early light of dawn painted the horizon in shades of pink and gold, Thomas noticed that Naomi seemed unusually restless. Her eyes darted nervously toward the distant hills, and she tugged at his sleeve, urging him to move quickly. Something was coming. Thomas scanned the land, his sharp instincts telling him that trouble was near. Then he saw them, a group of Apache warriors approaching in the distance, moving swiftly and with purpose. His heart sank. Naomi froze, caught between the instinct to run and the duty to her people. Thomas called out gently, trying not to startle her. "Stay calm," he whispered. "Whatever happens, I'll protect you." But Naomi knew that this was not a threat from strangers. It was her own people searching for her. The realization hit her hard. She had been lost, separated from her tribe, and now she was being called back. The connection she had formed with Thomas was strong, yet the ties to her family, her culture, and her people could not be ignored. Her heart ached as she looked at him, wishing she could stay forever but knowing it was impossible. The warriors arrived swiftly, surrounding them without a hint of hostility. Thomas raised his hands to show he meant no harm. Naomi stepped forward, speaking quickly in her language. Thomas could not understand the words, but he could see the mixture of relief and sorrow on her face. She had been found, and yet she had to leave. He felt a deep sense of helplessness. Years of living in the harsh wilderness had taught him to face danger, but this, losing Naomi to forces beyond his control, was a pain unlike any he had ever known. Naomi turned to him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She tried to speak, but the words faltered. She pointed toward the horizon, then back at him, her gesture filled with meaning. She had to go, but she did not want to forget him. Thomas took a deep breath, fighting the lump in his throat. "I understand," he said softly, even though his heart protested. "Go be safe. Find your people." He wanted to hold her close, to tell her that she could stay, but he knew that would be wrong. Naomi's life belonged to her tribe, and he could not take that from her. With a final, lingering look, Naomi followed her people into the hills. Thomas watched until they disappeared from sight, the emptiness left in their absence weighing heavily on him. The sound of the wind across the plains seemed louder now, more hollow. He walked back to the camp they had shared, touching the spots where she had slept, where she had gathered firewood, where they had shared stories. Every detail of her presence seemed to echo in the silence. For the first time since they had met, Thomas felt completely alone. In the weeks and months that followed, Thomas tried to continue his life. He traveled further into the plains, hunting and gathering supplies, building a small cabin near a river. Yet, every sight, every sound, every gust of wind reminded him of Naomi. He could not forget the bravery in her eyes, the quiet strength in her movements, the gentle way she had shared her world with him. Nights were the hardest. He would lie under the stars, imagining her beside him, remembering the way the firelight had danced across her face. He realized that some part of her had become a permanent part of him, and the thought that she might be gone forever was unbearable. Thomas attempted to distract himself. He met other settlers, traded goods, and even considered starting a family. But the memory of Naomi haunted him. No matter how hard he tried to focus on the present, his mind always drifted back to the girl who had entered his life so unexpectedly and had changed it forever. He found himself revisiting the paths they had walked together, the streams where they had rested, and the rocks under which they had sought shelter. Each place held a memory, a whisper of the bond they had shared. Meanwhile, Naomi's life had returned to her tribe, but the memories of Thomas were never far from her mind. She had been reunited with her family, and her people welcomed her back with warmth and relief. Yet she carried a quiet longing in her heart, remembering the kindness, courage, and gentleness of the young settler who had saved her. Life among her people was demanding. She had responsibilities, duties, and expectations, but the freedom and trust she had felt with Thomas lingered in her thoughts. She often found herself staring at the horizon, wondering what had become of him, hoping he was safe, and wishing that their paths might cross again. As seasons changed, both Thomas and Naeli grew stronger in their own ways. Thomas became a respected figure among the settlers, known for his honesty, hard work, and courage in facing the dangers of frontier life. He learned to survive alone, yet he never stopped hoping. Naeli became skilled in the traditions of her people, learning the ways of the elders, the wisdom of the land, and the skills necessary to thrive. Despite the distance, both carried the memory of their time together as a source of strength and hope. Years passed, and the land remained as wild and unpredictable as ever. Thomas faced harsh winters, battled illness, and dealt with bandits and wild animals, yet he endured, driven by the hope that Naeli might one day return. Each encounter with travelers, each rumor of the Apache girl in nearby settlements, made his heart race with anticipation, only to leave him disappointed. Still, he never gave up the belief that fate might bring them together again. Naeli, too, carried hope quietly in her heart. She told herself that she had responsibilities to her family and her people, but she never stopped thinking about Thomas. She remembered the way he had saved her, protected her, and shared his world with her without judgment. Those memories became a secret treasure she held close, a reminder that kindness and courage existed in the world beyond her tribe. She hoped, in some quiet corner of her mind, that one day their paths might cross again. Despite the pain of separation, their experiences had shaped them both. Thomas had learned patience, resilience, and the depth of his own capacity to care for another human being. Naeli had learned to cherish moments of trust and connection, understanding that true bonds could endure even when circumstances seemed impossible. Their hearts were tied together by invisible threads, stretched across distance and time, waiting for the day when fate might allow them to reunite. And so, life continued on the frontier. Thomas built his cabin, hunted for his meals, and maintained his homestead, yet every dawn reminded him of the girl he had thought he might never see again. Naeli lived among her people, following her duties and traditions, yet every night she gazed at the stars, remembering the man who had shown her a world filled with kindness and care. The memory of their brief time together remained vivid, a constant reminder that even in a harsh and unforgiving land, love and connection could leave a mark that no distance or time could erase. Even in the midst of heartbreak and longing, both Thomas and Naeli found strength in the memories of the bond they had shared. The frontier tested them in ways neither could have imagined, yet the experience had made them stronger, wiser, and more aware of the value of trust and loyalty. Though separated, they lived with the quiet hope that one day, the winds of fate might guide them back into each other's lives, allowing them to finally bridge the gap between their worlds and fulfill the promise that had begun under the rising sun of the plains, life in the years. After Naeli returned to her people was full of challenges and learning for both her and Thomas, though their paths remained separate. Naeli's homecoming brought her back to a world that was both familiar and unfamiliar. Her tribe welcomed her with relief and warmth, yet she could not fully shake the memories of the young settler who had helped her in her time of need. Every step she took, every task she performed, carried echoes of Thomas's presence, the kindness he had shown, the protection he had offered, and the quiet way he had listened to her without judgment. Naeli devoted herself to her people with diligence. She assisted the elders in their daily tasks, learned the complex ways of herbal medicine, and became a skilled hunter and tracker. Her people came to admire her strength, intelligence, and courage, unaware of the private sorrow that sometimes clouded her heart. She moved with purpose, yet often found her mind wandering to Thomas, wondering where he might be if he was safe, and if fate would allow their paths to cross again. The memory of their time together had become a quiet companion, a source of comfort in the midst of duty and expectation. Thomas, on the other hand, faced the harsh realities of life on the frontier. He had built a small cabin near a river and worked tirelessly to make it a home. Winters were cold and unforgiving, summers blistering and dry. Bandits roamed the area and wild animals threatened the livestock he raised. Every day demanded strength, patience, and resilience. Yet even as he toiled, his thoughts often returned to Nayeli. He remembered the softness of her voice, the intelligence in her eyes, and the courage she had shown when danger approached. Though many settlers had come and gone, no one had captured his heart as she had. He tried to keep busy, immersing himself in the rhythm of frontier life. He hunted deer and elk, fished in the river, and tended to the crops he had planted near his cabin. He traded with passing travelers, sometimes hearing tales of distant towns or other Apache bands, and each story made him hope, though cautiously, that Nayeli might still be alive and well. Nights were the hardest. The silence of the prairie seemed to stretch endlessly, and the stars overhead reminded him of the nights they had spent talking, laughing, and dreaming together by the fire. Those memories were bittersweet, bringing warmth and longing at the same time. Nayeli, too, carried memories that made her heart ache. She remembered the moments Thomas had saved her from danger, shared food with her, and treated her with respect. Her life among her tribe was fulfilling, yet she felt incomplete. She learned to mask her longing, appearing cheerful and strong before her people. But in quiet moments, she would sit alone and think of the man who had changed her life so profoundly. She wondered if he still thought of her, if he had moved on, or if he, too, felt the emptiness left by their separation. Time passed, and life moved forward, but fate had a way of keeping their stories connected, even across distance and circumstance. Thomas became known among the settlers for his skill and fairness. He built a reputation as a man who could survive any challenge and protect those in need. Yet, he remained solitary in his personal life. He had friends and neighbors, but the connection he had felt with Nayeli was unique, irreplaceable. No one else could fill the space she had left behind. He often rode along the trails they had once traveled together, hoping, even without knowing why, that he might catch a glimpse of her again. Meanwhile, Nayeli's understanding of her own strength deepened. She embraced her heritage with pride, learning the ways of her people and passing on her knowledge to the younger members of the tribe. She became a healer, using her understanding of plants and nature to care for those in need. Yet the lessons she had learned from Thomas, patience, trust, and quiet courage, remained with her. She realized that while she had returned to her people, part of her heart had been left with the man who had once saved her. The memory of him became a guiding light, shaping her decisions and her understanding of what it meant to care for others. Though separated by miles and circumstance, Thomas and Nayeli lived with the quiet hope that the other was safe. Their shared experiences had left an indelible mark on both of them. Each night, as Thomas lay under the stars, he pictured Nayeli's face, remembering the way she had looked when she first smiled at him by the river. Each day, as Nayeli moved through the routines of her life, she imagined Thomas enduring the hardships of the frontier, hoping that he was well and that life had treated him kindly. The bond they had formed in those first days of meeting remained unbroken, held together by memory, longing, and the unspoken understanding that they were meant to find each other again. Over time, Thomas began to consider the possibility of moving closer to the trading towns, where he might hear news of the Apache tribes or other travelers who had encountered them. He did not know if it would lead him to Nayeli, but the hope of seeing her again gave him a sense of purpose. Every story he heard of settlers and native tribes brought a spark of anticipation, and though many of these encounters ended in disappointment, he refused to give up hope. The memory of their connection was too strong, the longing too deep, to allow him to abandon the possibility of reunion. Naeli, in her own way, felt the pull of the world beyond her tribe. She loved her people and cherished her role within them, but she had glimpsed a life beyond the familiar plains, a life of freedom, trust, and partnership. She thought of Thomas often, wondering if he had survived the harsh winters, if he had built a home, and if he had kept their memories alive in his heart. The desire to see him again grew stronger with each passing year, though she knew that any reunion would require courage and careful timing. Both Thomas and Naeli experienced moments of joy, accomplishment, and growth during this time, yet the absence of the other created a persistent ache. Thomas would occasionally meet travelers who spoke of distant Apache bands, and his heart would leap at the possibility that Naeli might be among them. Naeli would hear stories from other tribe members about settlers who lived on the plains, and her mind would wander, imagining that Thomas might be near. Life continued, shaped by duty, survival, and the rhythms of the land, yet both carried the other within them, silently waiting for the day when their paths might converge once more. Despite the separation, both learned valuable lessons. Thomas realized that love was not just about possession or constant presence. It was about trust, patience, and hope. Naeli understood that courage was not only about facing physical danger, but also about honoring commitments to family, culture, and heart. Their experiences strengthened their spirits, shaped their character, and prepared them for the challenges that would come when they were finally reunited. And so, the years passed with quiet persistence. Thomas continued to build his life on the frontier, enduring hardships and celebrating small victories, always holding onto the hope of seeing Naeli again. Naeli thrived among her people, fulfilling her duties, learning and growing, yet never forgetting the young man who had changed her life with his kindness and courage. Though distance and circumstance kept them apart, the invisible thread of their bond remained unbroken, weaving a story of patience, resilience, and the quiet, enduring power of love. In those years, both Thomas and Naeli carried the same thought in their hearts, that life had a way of bringing people back together if the bond was strong enough. They did not know when or how it would happen, but the hope of reunion gave them strength to continue, courage to face each day, and the quiet certainty that the connection they had shared would endure beyond time, distance, and the hardships of the untamed West. The years had passed quietly, yet fate had a way of weaving stories in its own mysterious way. Thomas had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient through the hardships of frontier life. He had built a modest home near the river, cultivated small fields, and became well known among the settlers for his honesty, courage, and fairness. Yet despite his accomplishments, the memory of Naeli lingered in his heart. Every trail, every rustle of leaves, every sound of flowing water reminded him of the girl who had once trusted him with her life. He could not forget the bravery she had shown or the gentle way she had looked at him, full of quiet hope and courage. One late afternoon, Thomas decided to ride to the trading post several miles from his homestead. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the plains with shades of orange and gold, and the wind carried the familiar scent of dry grass. He rode steadily, enjoying the rhythm of his horse's hooves against the earth, yet his mind wandered back to memories of Naeli. He had spent countless hours imagining what she might be doing, where she might be, and whether she had ever thought of him as he had thought of her. He had grown used to this longing, yet it remained a gentle ache in his heart, one that never fully disappeared. As Thomas approached the trading post, he noticed a small crowd gathered near the entrance. Merchants were unloading goods, settlers were exchanging news, and travelers from distant towns were sharing stories of their journeys. Amid the bustle, his eyes caught a familiar figure, tall, confident, and moving with a grace that immediately drew his attention. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could the years and distance have not erased her from the world? Thomas urged his horse closer, his pulse quickening with anticipation. As the figure turned, Thomas's breath caught in his throat. It was Naeli. She was no longer the frightened girl who had clung to him by the river. She had grown into a strong, confident woman, her eyes still holding the depth of the spirit he remembered so vividly. For a moment, neither spoke. Time seemed to pause, and the sounds of the trading post faded away. It was as if the years, the distance, and the hardships had all melted in an instant, leaving only the two of them standing together. Thomas's hands shook slightly as he dismounted, and Naeli's eyes filled with tears of recognition and relief. She stepped forward slowly, her movements careful but determined. Thomas reached out instinctively, and their hands met. A flood of memories, emotions, and unspoken words passed between them in that simple touch. They did not need to speak immediately. The years of longing and hope were already expressed in their eyes. Naeli finally found her voice, and though her words were soft, they carried the weight of everything she had felt. She explained how she had returned once her duties to her tribe allowed her, and how she had never forgotten him. Thomas listened, holding her hand, his own voice trembling as he spoke of the years he had spent thinking of her, wondering if she was safe, and hoping she would one day return. The reunion was not without challenges. Naeli had responsibilities to her tribe, and Thomas had obligations among the settlers. Their reunion drew attention, some curious, some skeptical. There were whispers among the townsfolk and among her people, questioning whether such a bond could survive the differences in culture and upbringing. Yet, neither Thomas nor Naeli cared for the doubts of others. The bond they had formed so many years ago had endured through time, distance, and hardship. It had grown stronger, shaped by the memories of shared trials and the hope of eventual reunion. Over the following days, Thomas and Naeli spent time together, catching up on the years they had been apart. They shared stories of survival, of lessons learned, and of the people they had met along the way. Naeli told Thomas about the life she had returned to, about the wisdom of her elders, and the responsibilities she had embraced. Thomas shared tales of the frontier, of the challenges he had faced, and the small triumphs that had kept him moving forward. Every conversation was filled with laughter, awe, and a sense of wonder that they had both survived and found their way back to each other. The connection they felt was immediate, yet deeper than ever. Time and hardship had shaped them individually, making them stronger and wiser, yet their bond remained pure and unbroken. They began to plan a life together, understanding that it would require compromise, patience, and courage. Thomas promised to respect Naeli's heritage and the traditions of her people, while Naeli committed to embracing the life Thomas had built among the settlers. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, but they were ready to face it together. The townsfolk began to see the depth of their connection. Thomas, known for his fairness and kindness, was respected by everyone he met. Naeli, with her intelligence, strength, and gentle spirit, won the admiration of those around her. Slowly, people began to accept that their love was genuine, rooted in shared experiences, trust, and enduring commitment. Even those who had doubted them could not deny the sincerity and strength of their bond. As the days passed, Thomas and Naeli worked together to bridge their two worlds. They visited her tribe, showing respect for the elders and learning more about her culture. Naeli introduced Thomas to her people, explaining the story of how they had met and how they had cared for each other across the years. The tribe, seeing the sincerity in both their hearts, gave their blessing, understanding that their union was built on trust, courage, and love that had endured the trials of the frontier. Their reunion was not just a personal triumph, but a story of hope for those around them. It showed that even in a world filled with hardship, separation, and uncertainty, bonds formed through kindness, courage, and trust could survive and flourish. Thomas and Naeli became an example of resilience and love, inspiring others to hold on to hope, even when the path seemed impossible. In private moments, Thomas and Naeli reflected on the journey that had brought them back together. They remembered the fear, the longing, and the challenges they had faced. They laughed at the small moments of miscommunication, marveled at the skills they had learned from each other, and felt a deep gratitude for the chance to finally be together. The years apart had taught them patience, courage, and the true meaning of love, and they cherished every moment of their reunion with a newfound understanding of its value. Evenings were spent by the fire, where they shared stories and planned their future. They spoke of building a home together, raising a family, and honoring both their heritages. Thomas taught Naeli new skills for life on the frontier, and Naeli shared her knowledge of the land, healing, and survival. Every day brought new learning, new laughter, and new ways to strengthen their bond. The reunion was no longer just a moment. It was the beginning of a shared life built on trust, love, and mutual respect. As the sun set over the plains, casting long shadows across the land, Thomas and Naeli stood together, hand in hand, looking out over the horizon. They had faced years of separation, endured hardships, and carried hope in their hearts through every challenge. Now, finally, they had each other. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the scent of the wildflowers and the promise of a life filled with love, adventure, and shared dreams. For the first time in many years, they felt complete, knowing that whatever trials the future might hold, they would face them together. The story of their reunion spread quietly through the settlements and the surrounding tribes. It became a tale of hope, patience, and enduring love, a reminder that true connection could survive time, distance, and hardship. Thomas and Naeli's lives were forever intertwined, a testament to the power of faith, courage, and the unwavering belief that some bonds are meant to last a lifetime. Through the challenges of the past, the uncertainty of separation, and the trials of survival, they had finally found their way back to each other. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Thomas and Naeli held each other close, knowing that the wilderness that had once tested them had also brought them together. Their reunion was more than a meeting. It was the fulfillment of a promise neither had spoken aloud, but both had carried in their hearts all along. It was a beginning of a life where love, trust, and hope would guide every step they took together. Life after their reunion was a new beginning for Thomas and Naeli, one that brought joy, challenges, and the promise of a future built together. The frontier was still as wild and unpredictable as ever, with harsh winters, scorching summers, and the constant demands of survival. Yet, the difficulties that had once seemed overwhelming now felt lighter because they faced them side by side. Every day brought opportunities to learn from each other, grow stronger, and deepen the bond that had endured years of separation and longing. Thomas and Naeli began by building a home together near the river where they had first met. With careful planning and shared effort, they raised walls of sturdy timber, crafted furniture from local wood, and created a place filled with warmth and comfort. Naeli's knowledge of the land, plants, and natural resources proved invaluable, while Thomas's experience with construction and farming provided stability and structure. Together, they transformed the empty space into a home, a place where their love could thrive, and where the memories of the past could blend with the hopes for the future. Every morning they rose with the sun, tending to the land and caring for the small garden and livestock that would sustain them. Thomas taught Naeli skills she had never needed before, such as planting crops in rows, repairing fences, and making simple tools. Naeli, in return, shared her understanding of the land, teaching Thomas how to track game, find edible plants, and recognize the signs of changing weather. Their days were long and filled with labor, yet every task became an act of connection, a reminder that together they could face any challenge. Neighbors and settlers from nearby homesteads began to take notice of their partnership. Thomas, known for his fairness and courage, was respected by all, and Naeli, with her intelligence, strength, and grace, earned admiration for her wisdom and skill. People often came seeking advice or assistance, and the couple welcomed them, building relationships based on trust and kindness. Slowly, they became a part of a larger community, bridging the gap between the settlers and the local tribes. Their life together was a living example of how respect, patience, and love could unite different worlds. Naeli also remained connected to her Apache heritage. She visited her tribe frequently, sharing knowledge of farming, construction, and medicine she had learned with Thomas, while also learning more about her people's traditions and wisdom. Thomas accompanied her on these visits, earning the respect of her tribe by showing his sincerity, humility, and willingness to learn. Through patience and care, he built bonds not only with Naeli but with her people, proving that love and respect could overcome the barriers of culture and distance. As the seasons passed, the couple's life grew richer. They celebrated small joys, the first crops of the season, the birth of animals on the farm, the laughter of neighbors gathered for shared meals. Yet their greatest joy came from the realization that they had finally found each other and could now live without the constant ache of separation. Their love had matured, deepened, and become stronger because of the hardships they had endured. Each day together reinforced the bond that had begun in the wilderness so many years before. Family life soon became a central part of their story. Thomas and Naeli welcomed children into their home, and their family became a living bridge between cultures. Thomas taught his children the ways of the settlers, how to farm, hunt, and survive in the wilderness, while Naeli shared the traditions, stories, and wisdom of the Apache people. The children grew up learning both worlds, understanding the strength of heritage and the power of love, courage, and trust. Their home was filled with laughter, stories, and the lessons of generations past and present. Despite their happiness, life on the frontier still demanded resilience. Winters were harsh, bringing snowstorms and freezing temperatures that threatened crops and livestock. Summers were dry, and wildfires sometimes swept across the plains. Bandits and wandering outlaws posed occasional threats, and illness could strike without warning. Yet, Thomas and Naeli faced each challenge together, relying on each other's strengths and knowledge. The hardships that once separated them now strengthened their unity. Where Thomas brought practical experience and determination, Naeli brought intuition, resourcefulness, and courage. Together, they turned challenges into opportunities to grow stronger as a family and as partners. Their love and respect for one another became the foundation of everything they did. Even small moments, a shared meal, a quiet conversation by the fire, a walk along the river, were cherished. They never took each other for granted, knowing too well the pain of separation and the value of time spent together. Their story was a constant reminder that love required patience, trust, and dedication, and they practiced these virtues every day. As the years continued, their story spread beyond their homestead. Settlers and travelers would hear tales of the couple who had endured separation and hardship, only to reunite and build a life together. It became a story of hope, teaching others that true bonds could withstand time, distance, and adversity. Thomas and Naeli welcomed anyone who wished to hear their story, sharing lessons about courage, perseverance, and the power of love and understanding across cultures. In quiet moments, Thomas and Naeli would reflect on their journey. They remembered the first days by the river, when fear and uncertainty had filled their hearts, and marveled at how far they had come. They spoke of the challenges they had faced, the lessons learned, and the resilience that had carried them through years of separation. Each memory strengthened their appreciation for the life they had now, a life filled with love, family, and purpose. Their children grew up surrounded by love and guidance, learning not only survival skills but also the importance of respect, compassion, and courage. Thomas taught them how to ride horses, hunt, and care for the land. Naeli taught them stories of their people, how to find medicinal plants, and how to live with integrity and honor. Their family became a symbol of unity, a living bridge between two worlds, and a testament to the enduring power of love and determination. As the sun set each evening over the plains, Thomas and Naeli would stand together, watching the golden light touch the land. They knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but they faced them without fear because they had each other. The hardships of the past had shaped them, but their love had carried them through. They had found not only each other but also a life filled with meaning, purpose, and joy. In their hearts, Thomas and Naeli carried the memory of the wilderness where they first met, the river, the trails, and the nights under the stars. That place had been the beginning of a journey that had tested their courage and patience, but it had also shown them the true meaning of trust, love, and hope. They understood that the bond formed in those early days had been strong enough to survive separation, and that it had guided them to this moment of happiness and fulfillment. Years later, as they grew older, Thomas and Naeli would tell their children and grandchildren the story of how they met, how they were separated, and how they had found each other again. They emphasized the lessons they had learned, that love could survive distance and time, that courage and patience were essential in the face of hardship, and that respect for one another and for the world around them could build a life of joy and meaning. Their story became a legacy, inspiring future generations to believe in the power of hope, resilience, and enduring love. Even in old age, Thomas and Naeli remained devoted to each other, facing life's final challenges together. The trials of the frontier had long since passed, but the lessons they had learned remained ever present. Their love, tested and proven through years of separation, danger, and uncertainty, had endured. It had become a guiding light not only in their lives, but in the lives of all who knew them. And so, Thomas and Naeli's journey came full circle. What had begun as a chance encounter in the wilderness, a moment of trust and courage, had grown into a life filled with love, family, and purpose. The hardships of the past were no longer burdens. They were the foundation of a strong, enduring bond. The plains, the rivers, and the open skies bore witness to a story of resilience, hope, and the power of true love. In the end, they had not only found each other but had built a life that honored their past, celebrated their present, and inspired the future. Their story, whispered across the plains and told around fires in settlements and tribes alike, became a testament to the belief that some connections are destined to endure. Thomas and Naeli proved that even when the world seemed harsh and unforgiving, love, trust, and courage could create a life of beauty, joy, and meaning. Together, they faced the future with open hearts, confident in the knowledge that the bond they had fought to preserve would last a lifetime, carrying their story far beyond the boundaries of the frontier into the hearts of all who would hear it.